looks great. Okay, it's good.
We good?
Yep.
Really?
Just crawl.
Why don't you crawl underneath there, Jana?
Does that mean we're live?
Wow,
Yeah.
that
Crawling around
was
on the floor?
way... We were late last time, but
We're
this
way
time
late.
is
Whoa, we're way late.
real late. So, apologies
Sorry,
to
Andre.
one and all.
It's all right.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah, to say the least. I guess Jana says I need to update my computer. I guess I'm going to believe her now.
Yeah, Ken hasn't done a software update in a while.
1984, I think was the
we're-
last time I did a
I think
software
we're
update.
overdue for
Right.
a little maintenance.
Maybe on my 400-year-old
knows?
computer.
Who knows what it is?
Anyways, we're here. You have a
Yeah.
podcast. I'm your co-host Ken Conti, and you are who?
Jana.
Jana.
Yeah.
And I
Jana
get
Stratton.
Yeah.
And we got Andre. And
Yeah.
do it with the fancy pronunciation. Come on,
Ooh,
let's hear it.
there's a fancy
Andre
way?
Breton.
Andre
Yeah.
Breton.
Yes.
All right.
Is it
Men-
French?
It's quite French.
He's like,
But,
it is
but,
very French.
The truth, I was raised in Massachusetts by quite an English-speaking community.
Mm.
Yeah.
Darn.
It's a pity.
So you're a French Massachusettsan.
He's a Frenchman.
Yeah, and Scottish, which honestly, I'm quite excited to come to that conclusion because most of my life I was a bit of a revolutionary,
Mm-hmm.
and a peaceful revolutionary.
Okay.
I didn't
Okay.
burn any buildings down or anything, and I often wondered why that might be the case. And then it turns out I'm French and Scottish, so
Interesting.
It's
I
kind of a
am
natural
Scottish as
conclusion.
well.
Mm.
Very quite Scottish,
Mhm.
in fact. We were just home. My mom, her maiden name is Duncan.
Okay.
And in Scotland, it was Clan Donachie. That's how you say it. And they were related to the Robertson clan. And my mom is really big into ancestry. I think I said this on here before.
I don't
She's
think so.
traced it all back. And my mom and I, when I graduated college, we took a Scottish tour for 3 weeks and went to all of these places.
Fancy.
And so I was just home, and Ben, my husband, he's so funny. My mom has the clan flag like hanging at home,
Mm.
and the motto for Clan Duncan is "Learn to suffer." And my husband is like, "Learn to suffer? That's the clan motto?" So that's my family motto. Learn to suffer.
Not live long and prosper.
No, and I keep trying to think out. In fact, I have a picture of it. I keep trying to figure out, okay, what could be like a deeper meaning? What's a yogic meaning behind this learning to suffer situation?
I think there's some instruction that can
Yeah.
happen there.
And then it says something on there about Fat Duncan. I don't know what that means,
Mm.
but that's also in the clan flag.
Interesting.
Yeah, Scottish heritage is cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really interesting history they have.
And speaking of Scotland,
yeah, it's quite a
Or-
nice segue.
I mean, yeah, it is
By
kind of a
chance.
nice segue because you just started a bike tour in Scotland. I'm going to give it away right now. He rode his bicycle, this young man, from Scotland.
Young man here.
Yeah, to Istanbul, Turkey.
That's right.
I was thinking about it. I was wondering if there's any way he could have fudged that. I was like, well, he could have just done like social media posts, throwing his bike up on top of a
Green
van or
screen.
something. Sure, why not? But
Expert hitchhiker.
seemed a little too real for me. But let's start with little Andre.
where?
Yeah, let's start with little Andre.
I'm like, what are you talking about? Your childhood.
Where'd you grow up? What did that look like?
I thought there was a funny picture.
I
but
know, me
was
too.
Yeah.
I was like, what are we
Let's talk
talking
about little Andre first.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about little Andre for a moment.
Okay.
I grew up in Massachusetts in a little town named after Benjamin Franklin, the famous Ben.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So Ben, Massachusetts.
just Franklin.
Oh, okay.
Unless you go to the savings bank in town, then you can find Benjamin Franklin Savings
Okay.
Bank.
Oh, okay.
So it's
Interesting.
spelled right out
Okay.
there for you.
Franklin, Mass.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's so as a youngster, for fun, my friends and I would sometimes travel into the city
Is
of
it working?
Boston by train,
Mhm.
Okay.
just to give you an idea how close we were.
Wow, that's
So
pretty close.
a suburb, Boston suburb kid.
Okay.
Yeah.
What'd you do for fun? Play lacrosse?
The game when I was a youngster, we would walk to a local pond and play pond hockey in the winter. That was
there you
very
go.
popular. We played street hockey under the street lights.
Mm-hmm.
But soccer and baseball were also quite popular. In fact, by the time I was roughly 12, I had committed mostly to the sport of soccer,
Okay, cool.
which
You
I
strike me
played
as a
for while.
soccer player.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Spry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So for fun, to give you a bit of my past that I think is relevant to this latest chapter in my life, where I climb onto a bicycle, and for a few different reasons I go on these really long journeys. This last one was the biggest, at 4,392 miles when it was over in
Whoa.
Man,
13 countries.
that's insane.
One of my earliest memories in life is kind of fun, and I didn't spend much time thinking about it, though obviously my mind was holding on to it. And in my 40s, I've begun to question coincidence, and so this would be one more example of that I remembered this particular something from probably around the age of 6 or 7 or 8, so super early memory, where I'm tiptoe on a radiator in the kitchen of my family home before they renovated the kitchen, these old cast iron radiators, and my fingertips are on the ledge of the window, and I'm pulling up on those tiptoes just so I can see just behind my yard. And just back behind the yard is a hill on a street called Peck Street. So as kids, we just called it Peck Street Hill. The whole universe knew about it.
Sure.
But more importantly, now that I'm in my 40s and I spend a lot of time in yoga, for example, I look back at that moment in my life, and I realized that, for one thing, I was achieving an early meditative state in my youth. I was looking out that window, staring at that hill. I'm sure looking left and right from time to time, but I was mesmerized by a couple of adult concepts that would later make sense to me. But one was, I was very curious. I had this deep curiosity, even at that age. And also, I had a wanderlust. So looking back on that experience, I realized that already the seeds of those two requirements for going out on a bicycle like I did this last time, and just each day, oftentimes planning each day the day before or changing it during that day, those seeds were already inside of me when I was a child, as early as I can recall. And I was wearing a onesie, by the way, to put the story on here.
What color?
Awesome.
It probably had Peanuts characters on it.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, Greg LeMond wasn't in like a pack going up that hill or anything. It was just the hill.
Who's Greg LeMond?
No, it's just the hill. Yeah, Greg LeMond. Well,
He's the only guy that I
very
could
famous
come up
American
with
cyclist.
that would
Okay.
would he have been riding back then,
A famous American cyclist?
or was he later than that?
He's not that much older than me. I mean, he's
He's
certainly
older than you, though.
But I don't think it's, maybe it's
15
a
years.
dozen
Yeah.
years, 15 years.
Okay, so
somewhere in
maybe,
the window.
yeah, he could have been riding up that hill. If there was a big bicycle race
Yeah.
that went through Franklin, Mass. at that
On
point.
Peck Street Hill,
Yeah.
Franklin.
But I get the idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I get it too. So what took you from Massachusetts, and how did you end up out here?
Yeah, let's see. I was a bit reluctant to take up a path that was maybe good for my future. I made some poor choices in high school, and then I got really lucky. I met this fellow literally at a time clock one day, punching in. At the time, I was working for a company making caulking, stuff you put around your tub and your windows to keep the cold air.
Oh, that is ripe for jokes.
I
You worked at a cock
I
factory.
love cock, for sure.
Yeah, you worked at a
I
cock
actually
factory.
really do love to cock things.
Yeah.
I do. It's the
changing
truth.
Do you have a
shapes,
favorite color cock?
White.
Oh, jeez.
Wow.
You said that so fast.
You tricked me.
You said that so fast. My God.
Gosh, I really set my.
Anyway.
You sure did,
Wow.
but it's
What
cool.
was that?
I really do
You
love.
were working in a caulking factory. I mean,
Uh,
Jesus.
The people I know, if any friends that know that history, they're laughing out loud.
Anyways. You're in Massachusetts.
Well, yeah,
You're
I'm
in Massachusetts,
and
working
I'm-
at a caulking factory.
Right, just there,
Right.
and I'm talking like that.
Okay.
By the way, years later, I'd get a job in Arizona working at Grand Canyon National Park
Oh, nice.
Wow.
for very little money. I was essentially
Sure.
a volunteer, but it was a cool job for
Yeah.
sure, and it was an opportunity for me to leave Massachusetts and explore. By then, I was a major in biology
Mhm.
Okay.
at a small state.
So, but
college.
who did you meet at the
Right,
at the
so-
time clock?
Right,
I got to
so-
hear this.
Right, so at the time clock, I meet this fellow who's a friend who remains a cherished mentor.
Okay.
So this whole concept of mentors is really interesting too, and it's too bad that our society doesn't give more
Mhm. I agree.
value to this idea of having mentors.
I
But
agree.
David befriends me. He's 10 years older, roughly.
Mhm.
He's a master's in business. He's a salesman for the company selling cock.
Okay. He's a cock
Quite-
salesman.
Yeah,
Hot
Alright,
commodity.
see,
Hot
I can-
commodity.
Yeah.
I can maybe manage to hang with you guys.
We're just talking about malleable
Just
plastic.
Slinging cock.
That's
That's
right.
right.
Well, sometimes we did sling it.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, I'm not sure I've ever point blank asked him. He'd probably say something like, "I saw in you the possibility of doing more with your life." He'd say something like that, I'm sure.
Okay.
He very quickly began to offer to help me to go to college. So I've been working at this company in high school, driving the forklift at night, working the night shift. And when I graduated,
Listen to night moves.
sometimes, yeah, I even crashed the forklift
Wearing
essentially through a door one night. But
Oh wow.
a bit of a reckless teenager, yeah. But the company kept
So we're
me
talking
going.
1980s.
Yeah, at 89 I get out of high school.
Okay.
I go full time for this company, day shift. So
Okay.
and now I'm really crushing life, right?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
are.
And I
Working
thought,
day
I'm
shift,
finished.
driving a forklift.
Exactly. Yeah,
That's
listening
good.
to Led Zeppelin and
Nice.
Nice.
wearing
Good.
moccasins. It was all there.
Mm.
Driving a '73 Mustang.
I love
Nice.
It wasn't.
it. You
yeah.
were just too cool.
73s,
Too
yeah.
cool for words.
73 is like just past the prime. But yeah.
But you were
But
cool.
still, I
anyway.
would have loved to have had a 73 Mustang. Anyway.
Later, I had '64 Mustang.
Ooh,
Is that better?
yeah. 64 and a half probably.
Well, actually, you know, I should take it there. It might have been a '65.
Yeah.
And there's no
'Cause
surviving
65
images to
Yeah,
prove
because
it.
65 was the first year, really, technically, but it was a 64 and a half. Anyways, go
Yeah.
Mm.
It was
Continue on.
It was a record.
Shop talk over here. I'll just glaze over.
All right, so to make a long story short, he offers to help me get into college, and
That's
for the
weird.
first many months, I said, "No way, David. I'm not going anywhere near that." Probably with some expletives, you know.
Okay.
But eventually, I actually said yes to him, and he took a sticky note from his desk and he wrote 3 things on it, and he said, "Go do this and then come back." And some of it was get all these applications, and I bring them back, and he'd sit next to me, and he helped me fill them out. And
What
then
were they? What colleges were they for?
Most of the state colleges in Massachusetts,
Okay.
and then a few outliers in New England, and a few long shots. Like I remember, I think one of them was the University of Vermont, which
Mm-hmm.
they probably didn't even open the package.
Why? I got into University of Vermont. I
You
was
did,
no,
really?
I was no genius. I got in early, even. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
no
well,
genius. That's for sure.
My
Good bullshitter though.
testing scores were outrageously bad.
Mm.
But I made some very big mistakes in high school. One, for example, was I developed a dislike for English classes,
Mm.
which I really regret.
Mm-hmm.
I was good in math, but I didn't exercise that skill. If I had, I could have done well with that. So anyway, I went through this process that wasn't so productive. But I applied to 13 colleges with
Holy
David.
moly, that's a lot of work in
lot.
itself.
Yeah, and I was accepted to 1.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
And it was
amazing.
at the time it was the cheapest
What?
and the lowest ranked college, state college in Massachusetts. And
Cool.
rumor had it, and now I made some bad choices early in my bachelor's
Didn't
degree
we
as well.
all?
So I joined a fraternity. Okay, so
Nice.
I
Sig Phi for life.
My second
was it?
semester, which
What-
nearly got me out of college.
Yeah, what was the fraternity?
Pi Epsilon Pi.
Pi Epsilon
Nice.
Pi. All right.
Yeah,
I don't
and
even
it was
know.
it was local, so and they're still there, and
Good for them.
for the most part flourishing, I think.
Hmm.
But the rumor was that Animal House was based on some stories from
way.
North Adams State College,
Oh,
where
man.
so I bring up this fraternity thing because I did see it firsthand, and I cherish that film. Right, it's hilarious,
Sure.
It's a good one.
and I
Mhm,
think
yeah.
it probably was.
If you enjoy
the inspiration.
Based on
date
your-
rape and excessive
Well-
drinking, it's a fantastic
I
movie.
haven't seen
Well, I
Animal
don't-
House in a long time.
There's no
It's
date
probably
rape.
not particularly sensitive to
Modern
these modern
sensitivities,
times,
yeah.
but it's hysterical.
Yeah,
For
exactly.
sure. Yeah.
So you.
So I got into college. Thanks, David. David took me on as a apprentice.
What are your parents thinking at this point? Are they like, "Hey, who's this dude who's helping you get into college?" Or did they go to college? Was there any thoughts of you going to college? How did that all go down?
Actually, college was in my family. We could count how many people went to any form of college, night classes,
Mm-hmm.
associate's degrees, and probably with half a hand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe two of us.
So 2.5 people.
So it was very unusual.
Okay.
My mother was a housewife,
Okay.
raising her 3 boys,
Mm-hmm.
and my father was a machinist actually for most of 50 years.
Wow.
He just retired.
Wow.
He did go to college, night school,
Mm-hmm.
Worcester Polytech.
Okay.
Other than
Learned how to
that,
program those CNC machines and such.
he was a mold and die maker.
Oh, interesting.
So-
I mean, I find that interesting. Most people
Yeah.
probably wouldn't, but
but
I
he
think it's pretty
certainly
cool.
worked with programmable machines. This
Mhm.
concept of CNC machine.
Mhm.
He was old school. He can still. He's alive and well, living in the home where
Mhm.
I was raised most of my life, other than a short stint in another space.
Mm-hmm.
He can make pretty much anything with a standard lathe,
Oh yeah.
right?
Mhm.
That's
Yeah, those
his
old
skills
school
go
dudes can
way
do that,
beyond.
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
he had some college. My brothers, my younger brother went back to school very late in life and acquired a degree in information technology
Mm-hmm.
and used that to make some money for a while until he hated having a desk job. So he's
Mm.
now gone back to some of his previous talents. My brothers, they're very talented artists. Whatever
Mhm.
they touch, especially my older brother,
Mm-hmm.
which my younger brother would agree, I'm sure, but both of them are amazing artists.
Cool. What kind of art do they do?
So, for example, to give you a sense of my older brother, he's an artist that he's a sculptor,
Mm-hmm.
presently sculpting stone. But when he was in high school, he made these figures out of clay, and they were amazing.
Yeah.
And I remember them. It's an early memory
Mhm.
of mine. But later, his true passion in life was music, and he would close to when he decided to walk away from music, he was studying with some very famous jazz musicians in
Cool.
Harlem.
Cool.
So he's a musician with that much,
Yeah, that's neat.
that wide of a spectrum.
Hmm.
My younger brother is really his talents are wrapped around wood.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say he's a rapper. I mean, wood is cool. Wood is cool
Wood
for
is
sure.
He's
But
a
man,
great
if he was a
carpenter.
rapper and he had some cool rapper name,
That would be weird,
that'd be pretty sweet.
but it would also be nice.
It'd be awesome.
So, what did you do after college? Did you graduate
Yeah, neat.
in
Gosh,
4
yes.
years and moved on? And
I did, and in fact, 2 years, about 2, maybe 2.5 years into my undergraduate experience, I discovered a new Andre, one that took his classes quite serious,
Mm.
and I majored in biology and began to visualize a new future for myself.
Wow.
And
This was the
this was
Andre
outdoor.
2.0, or maybe the Andre 3000.
Right. and-
Slip in the rap name, right? Huh?
I love when it comes full circle.
It's really
and-
fun like that, isn't it? Anyway.
The subculture cycles down in Salida, they refer to me as Andre 2,000,
Really?
3,000, depending on how well I'm racing.
Oh, interesting.
Sometimes,
Okay,
sometimes they increment it up to 4,000.
Ooh,
4,200.
wow. Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah,
Okay.
subculture.
I love that.
It's a great shop, by the way. You can check it out.
So you're discovering that you do care about things.
Yeah, so,
And you want to do well?
Yeah, so
Okay.
my last 2 years as an undergrad, my GPA was a 4.0 in my major.
Look at
Wow,
Adams
how
State,
about that,
North
huh?
Adams State, just
At North
bringing
Adams,
out,
at North-
bringing out the best in you.
And honestly, I still found the opportunity to go to keg parties
There
probably
you go.
twice a week. So
Twice.
So how familiar does Good Will Hunting seem to you? The movie.
Oh, it's quite familiar.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And the accents, of course, they take me home.
Do they?
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
endearing in a very chalkboard, nails on chalkboard sort of way. But yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've since lost the accent.
I mean, kind of. You can
Yeah.
you can hear it when he says hockey.
Ah.
Hockey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, well done. If we ever do this again, we should phone in and bring my mom into the
Oh,
conversation.
man.
Oh, really? Is it
'Cause-
full on?
Oh, it's deep.
Nice.
Boston.
And
Okay.
if I spend time with her, in particular, it begins to come out. Now, there's
Yes.
another amazing topic, right? It's that accent is entirely in my mind
Yes.
still,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't generally come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many
that's-
beers does it take for it to come out?
Well, these days I'm quite a lightweight. On this bike tour, by the way, one night, and if by any means my friends that I made in Niš, Serbia, are listening,
Really?
I'd love that if they were. They might be. I have a connection to them on social media.
Yeah.
I had 3 beers in the restaurant with them, the family restaurant.
Uh-huh.
That was the most beer I drank in one night on the bike tour.
Sure.
Usually I'm a half beer guy these days.
Yeah. There you go.
So
With
how'd
my
the-
soccer buddies.
How'd the 3 beers go?
I was hungover then. I was, and they offered me a couple more too, and I finally had to. I said that.
You're like,
yeah.
Yeah.
nah, I don't think so. Well, so I want to get to the bike tour, and before
Yeah.
you were saying that you were in a career that you stopped
Yeah.
for certain reasons, and that's kind of sounds like a pivotal moment for you. So what was that
It was.
about?
Yeah. So I spilled out of my undergraduate and began a lifestyle of working as a field biologist. And when I wasn't working as a field biologist in the off season of basically the warm months,
Mm-hmm.
I'd work as an outdoor educator. So I was flipping these jobs, working 3 and 6 months, and also, by the way, jumping on an old Honda motorcycle.
That's right.
A
I'm
1982
glad you're getting to that. Yeah.
CX500 cc motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
That before it was over, I rode that motorcycle 80,000 miles
Just so impressive.
over
Oh,
all the lower 48 states and everything east of
Wow.
Manitoba. So that was my 20s, and then into my early 30s when
Have
I was.
you got on a bicycle at this point?
No. In fact, the bicycle for me,
So interesting.
it ends at 16 and a half. I get my license.
Mm-hmm.
Up to that point, the bicycle was transportation.
Sure.
And I cannot remember what I did with the bicycle. The last bicycle that I had, I must have leaned it in my dad's garage, and
Sure.
I did not buy another bicycle till March 2010.
No way.
Yeah.
You've only been riding bikes for 9 years?
That's
Are
right.
you
That's
kidding me?
crazy.
That's the truth.
Oh, that's weird.
So I entered graduate
Huh.
school on the eve of my 30th birthday.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
late at everything in life, it turns out. I was a year after high school getting into the undergrad space.
Okay.
And I sort of barely get into grad school too. This old school English fellow who's now just retired from the university in Eastern Canada decides to take a chance with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to grad school
In
Eastern
Canada.
Canada, yeah, in New Brunswick,
Hmm.
which is part of the reason
Why?
I went on a big tour in Eastern Canada last year.
Okay.
That's
But why
part of the
Canada?
story.
There's lots of great colleges in the United States.
For one, my GRE scores were also quite bad.
You a bad tester?
Well, especially when,
Because you don't strike me as not intelligent.
right, so the GRE, I made some very bad choices before I took that test, and preparation was not one of them.
Okay.
And by the time I was halfway into those exams, I was just filling in ovals because I was really frustrated.
Okay.
So I did very poorly on those, and also I'd been out of college now for basically six
Right.
years.
Okay.
So the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton, with Tony's backing, was willing to take me with my existing scores.
And you didn't know this guy?
I knew him from the community of marine biologists,
Oh, okay.
that worked with seabirds, in
Okay.
particular marine birds. It's a bit, my story's a bit convoluted. I had been working seasonally, mostly with marine birds, such as the Atlantic puffin,
Mm.
Oh, wow.
probably the chief bird of the charismatic mini fauna,
The charismatic mini fauna. I love it.
which I would.
As opposed to the charismatic megafauna.
That's right.
So you can't eat puffin. I mean,
Well-
you can, but people get really upset. Kind of like the
You want to keep
charismatic
it to
megafauna.
yourself if
Yeah.
you're eating a puffin.
Okay. Yeah.
But people do harvest them, actually. The word harvest is Newfoundland and Norway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I went to grad school, and 5 years later I finished with a PhD rather than a master's. I ended
Wow.
up skipping the master's.
So you're Dr. Breton.
It turns out.
It turns out.
I keep that under the radar.
He's
Under
got a
the-
PhD.
My soccer
like a
buddies,
doctor.
They sometimes call me Dr. Dre, but I don't think anyone realizes, and they hear it.
Dr. Dre.
That
You are
is
like
real.
so opposite Dr. Dre that it's amazing.
You apparently were meant to be some sort of hip hop artist.
Yeah,
though.
for sure. With those glasses, how
Yeah.
could you not be?
Yeah, I thought I would come as the bike rider
Yes,
a little
I
bit
love
today,
it.
just so if anybody watches a video
They're like,
on
oh, what's that
Instagram
guy
or
wearing?
Facebook,
Huh.
they'll recognize me because
Yeah.
otherwise, normally I have a tie on.
A tie.
I've never
Gosh.
seen you wear a tie.
When do you wear ties? I like it. I mean, we don't exactly
haven't
dress
done
up to
ties.
go to yoga, but
So you get on a
so
bike in
PhD.
and you get on a bicycle in 2009. How does that happen? So are you in a bike?
Point time,
You're
yeah.
not on a bike yet because
Right, so I finished grad school.
2
months before I actually
Hey.
finished, I get a call from Alaska.
But you don't finish grad school. You finish your postgraduate school, right? Because you got a PhD.
Right, yeah, so 2 months before I defend that PhD, I get a call from my good friend now, from Lauren Buck from Alaska. He's a prof up there.
Mm-hmm.
And he invites me to do a postdoc. So I go to Alaska for 5 years. I do 2 postdocs up there. Then I have a bit of
This is a lot of schooling.
right.
Holy moly!
a bit of a relationship
5 years, 10 years,
experience.
14 years. Okay, 14 years
Yeah.
of schooling.
Then I have a short stint in Hawaii, which,
Okay.
by the way, I'd encourage everyone to go hang out with the eccentric folks that live in the forest, for example, and on the Big Island where I lived for a while. And then I get another call. It's Colorado State.
Mm-hmm.
They have a fisheries job. And by the way, my background is now quantitative and ecology, fish, mammals, and birds in particular,
Okay.
and population demography, that sort of thing. So fairly
Numbers.
heavy analysis, putting marks on animals, releasing them, see where they go, how often they come back, that sort of thing.
Sounds really interesting.
So that's where so I end up in this town,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very important part of the story.
Okay.
Obviously, this town celebrates the bicycle like few others in the
And
United
fish,
States.
for that matter.
Right, and they celebrate fish. So there's a project in the Upper Colorado River Basin, and I heard a story yesterday on NPR. People are trying to get basically tickets to go down the Yampa River through Dinosaur National Monument, which there are 10,000 people wanting to get in,
Wow.
and they only have 300. They don't have a ticket. They call it.
Whatever.
It's not quite the word I want to use.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But for work, I got to float down that canyon.
Oh, that's cool.
Yampa Canyon, it's called.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty.
It's such a nice job benefit. But so here I come here in November 2009. I start a postdoc that would ultimately take 5 years, working with a massive group of
So that's that's 19 years of education. I'm just doing math in my head.
Of higher ed.
So 4-year undergrad, 5 years in Canada, 5 years in Alaska, and 5 years in Colorado.
You're right.
Right?
I hadn't
Okay.
totaled it up.
19 years, buddy.
Yeah.
That's a bunch.
That kid on the radiator,
Yeah.
he there's something, maybe you never could have gotten it out of him even then, but he was honest then. He walks with his heart forward, exposed. He does things because he believes in them.
You're talking about yourself in the third person right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I was in it. Did you see how deep I was?
Yeah, you're like,
Uh-huh.
he does. Uh-huh.
So I don't want to undervalue our university system,
Sure.
but that part of me suffered.
Okay.
And the more I fought,
Because
that
you were like
process,
you were like a cog in the machine.
yes,
Even
as
though
a-
it was
as
like a
opposed to-
cool machine of like doing cool stuff for the environment and animals and all this cool stuff. My
Yeah.
talents are being used. I still feel like I'm just meh.
You're being moved around a chessboard,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and you see success, with people that you're wondering, well, what do I have to do to
Mhm.
make that transition? And ultimately, you realize, well, it's just who you know
Mm.
in the system,
Mm-hmm.
and people aren't nice.
Right.
Oftentimes, and there's just like outright cruelty in that system, which I would ultimately experience thanks to one administrator in particular that just never liked me.
Mm.
Interesting.
The sort of person you walk in the morning and you say good morning, and they literally ignore you.
Wow.
Such an interesting phenomena,
That was
right?
Close to the conclusion. Well, actually, I was actually right at the beginning of the last postdoc, so I persisted for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm. Tried to suck it up, and then you were just
I
like,
did.
yeah, I'm good. What was
But-
that? What did that transition look like when you were like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore? When you got
Right.
done with CSU?
Right. So here, this brings in the bicycle. So
Oh yeah.
in March 2010, I buy a bicycle. Why? Because this town inspired me to buy a bicycle.
Wow,
Honestly,
that's
Neat.
How is the Coloradoan not written this
I
article? What the hell's
know.
going on? Anyways,
I don't
go
know.
ahead. There's plenty of pages in your future.
Well, I walk
Keep
into
going.
Recycled Cycles.
Yeah. All right.
And
Did you get a three-wheeler?
one in Mason, and I impulse purchase a GT Avalanche, which I still have.
Interesting.
And I'm struggling at the moment because the choices I've made have led to very few assets and less space to put them in.
Sure.
So this
Yeah.
GT Avalanche, I'm often looking at it thinking I need to give it up. 'cause
Is it
I have no
blue?
place to put it. It's bright orange,
Okay.
I don't know. I feel like you've got to keep the first bike.
right?
You know, find somebody to keep it for you while you.
Right.
Sounds like Jana's volunteering.
Ooh,
Yeah, you can throw it in
Um,
my
it
basement. Yeah.
doesn't take much.
Yeah, you can throw it in my basement.
Really, wow.
See how that
Look
works?
at that. Hurrah. Bam.
Well, I buy this bike, and at this point, I'm working.
What time of the year is it?
March.
It's March.
March. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I just wasn't paying attention.
It's all right.
Thanks, Jana.
March 10th or 13th, somewhere.
What?
I have the original receipt.
What?
It's pretty neat. Yeah.
Wow.
It's on my website actually, on AndreBretonRacing.com. If you go
Yeah.
under more, you'll see the beginning, and
Okay.
I actually
Cool.
created a little page for the GT. So I buy this bike, and at that time, I'm working in literally, in my mind, what is the highest. Like, if I, as a field biologist, and then a grad student, and then a postdoc 3 times, I learned who had written, of course, so many different papers and books, and I had by then isolated a few individuals, like David Anderson, who had just retired when I got to CSU, but it didn't matter because, well, it mattered to me, but he stuck around, fortunately, so I got to interact with him. But my office was was 2 doors away, 1 door away, no, 2, from where he had written books that had become so important to me. So I was an apprentice from afar, and he was a master. And for me to arrive and work in the space where he wrote some of the things you wrote, for me was my highest level achievement that was, in my view, possible.
Okay.
So this space where I was working was very important to me.
Uh-huh.
So I was my point in sharing that is I was feeling very good, even though the previous 2 postdocs in my PhD had burned me out at least twice.
Sure.
Like full burnout, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
After my second postdoc, actually in Alaska, I concluded that on a very positive note, and then I started flipping cars for a while. I was buying and selling old Subaru and Toyota wagons.
What? Wait a minute.
That's fun.
And I did that for about a year because I was so burned out.
You
Okay.
just needed something totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, honestly,
Grease under the fingernails.
yeah, I cherished it. I would walk around, car graveyards with a bucket and wearing coveralls and pull parts and buy old cars, and I loved it.
Oh, that's cool.
But I took another job and went back into academia. But I was at the pinnacle, in my opinion, and this is important too, to understand what happened to me. I felt like I was at the pinnacle then, but most people would have said, no, you're not at the pinnacle until you get tenure. But that never mattered to me. What mattered to me was my curiosity and the answers that I continued to develop and push out, perspective, etc., the people I met that I respected.
Sure.
This is what mattered to me. And to arrive with David Anderson and Ken Burnham as my neighbors, these 2 guys were superheroes for me.
Mm-hmm.
That was for me as good as it could ever get. So I was very excited to be there. But as time progressed, I got more and more. I became more and more on the receiving end of the bad stuff of academia, and I developed a very serious, in my opinion, depression.
Mm-hmm.
Within 3 years, I was in the worst mental shape that I had been in my entire life.
And you riding your bike all the time at this point?
So this is great.
Okay.
It's a great question. So 3 years in, roughly, I tear my groin playing soccer.
Oh,
Ow.
It's an overuse injury. I'm playing on 5 intramural teams, non-professional sort of thing. Right? So I'm
5?
overdoing it. Yes.
No, really?
5.
Yeah.
But you're
And you're not
searching
doing it.
probably for
Yeah.
other outlets. And,
Well, I think my mind knew that exercise was keeping me alive.
yeah.
Sure.
So I tear my groin and I start this really intensive physical therapy program, which is when I showed up at Elan Yoga, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I walked in there and met Libby at the desk and said to her, I have this, hi, my name's Andre, I'm a soccer player, and I tore my, actually, sorry, I didn't know I tore my groin. I walked in there and said, I think I hurt myself, hurts here, and I think I should go to yoga and I'll feel better. And Libby Lyons, as so many people know in town, huge heart. She says, you should go see John upstairs. He's a physical therapist before you go to yoga class. Well, it turned out I wouldn't go to yoga class for about 3 years because my groin was so messed up.
Wow.
But in the process, I would meet Brad Hobeck and Kyle Larson and Gretchen, folks from Yoga Platform Collins, and they'd become my friends. They didn't invite me to dinner parties or anything. Hint, hint. But
Right,
It's okay. I haven't been to.
invited.
Yeah, I haven't been to their
But-
dinner parties either.
It's
for the inner circle only.
right. It's hard to break into, but they became my friends in space. There's probably
It's like the yoga Illuminati.
naughty
Everybody's
stuff
welcome.
going on there.
Everybody's welcome.
So the point I want to make is I start riding the bike more because I can't play soccer and I have this addiction already to exercise, which I don't understand. So I start riding the bike more and more and more and more and more. And what happens is, I believe now, the bicycle brought me very gradually into a space where my head was up above the mud. I could finally see a little bit above this space that I was stuck in, this dark space of negativity and
Mm-hmm.
feeling no hope. The bicycle, just turning the crank over
Mm-hmm.
and over and over. Some of it was meditative, some of it was physical changes to my body and my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I credit the bicycle
Okay.
for taking me out of a very serious depression
Amazing.
without even realizing it. So this is part of what I want
Goosebumps.
people to share.
Yeah.
This
I
is
felt it.
yeah. This is part of the reason I would later become so committed to the bike when I realized what it gave to me. I wanted to just then give that back to everybody
Sure.
who would be willing to listen for
Okay.
the rest of my life. Because for
Wow.
me, it was a miracle that I never saw
Yeah.
coming. So, how did I leave the university? I probably would have crashed and burned hard,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know what that would have looked like.
Yeah.
But instead, the bike gave me enough clarity to see that it wasn't working and why,
Mm-hmm.
and then to make the break and walk away peacefully, and then continue my self healing
Mm-hmm.
by doing more of that.
Cool.
And then, a few years more pass, and we're sitting here talking about a 5,000-mile journey roughly across Europe. It was an evolution with, one might say, a lot of chance. But I would love to just throw in there again that in my 40s, I've really started to
Yeah.
question coincidence.
I don't believe in coincidence.
Yeah.
Even though
At
I'm
all.
not religious. Not
I'm
one
not
iota.
either. I think
Oh,
it's
but you
more-
do have, this is something that I wanted to bring up.
Oh.
You said you have a strict belief in the goddess Epona,
Mhm.
who is the patron saint of horses, ponies, donkeys, and mules,
Yeah.
and also a video game character on Zelda, but
I didn't
also
know that.
the goddess of fertility.
Yeah.
Tell us
Yeah.
about that.
Well, honestly, there's. I wish there was a bigger story there, but
I mean, horses,
thought-
bicycles kind of make sense.
yeah. No, honestly, sometimes the bad outcomes of religious faith really get me down.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I put that on Facebook, it was I was making fun a little bit of those commitments to religion by
Okay.
saying, okay, well, my God is Epona, and I've considered taking it off, but
I think it's
maybe it
funny.
gets people.
Yeah.
Maybe it gets people
Well, it's
thinking a little
interesting.
bit.
There's a woman, her name's Dr. Jean Houston, and she has committed her whole life to studying Greek and Roman mythology. And she talks a lot about how we are meant to embody gods and goddesses because those stories of it's all a hero's journey.
Oh yeah.
It all follows the same
Mhm.
path of trials and tribulations and motivation, and then this turning point of clarity, and then dedicating yourself to this path, and then really embodying what that god or goddess stands for. So you should dig in a little bit more
For sure.
to
Yeah.
what that is,
Yeah.
because
I expect a giant horse tattoo on your
yeah,
back.
and she's, she's a PhD, and she's dedicated her entire career to this literature and how it plays a part in our humanity, and so maybe there's something there for you.
Well,
Maybe he is on a hero's journey.
Yeah, well, you are on a hero's
Right.
journey. I mean, I think this is the thing that people are looking for when
the
they
sirens.
step into a yoga studio is, how can I want something to be different. Something needs to change, something needs to click, and you have found that, and that's why a lot of people become yoga teachers, because they found it on the yoga mat or whatever, and then they have this just innate desire to share, and it's almost more than a desire, it's like an obligation, it's like a
Yeah.
responsibility to share that with other people.
Yeah.
And so you've had that on the bike. And by the way, I mean, yoga can be anything, right? Yoga can be riding a bike or riding a horse.
Mhm.
So I guess this tour, is this the first time that you've really hopped on your bike solo and just gone for a long period of time?
I've actually lost track the count at this point, and I thought about trying to make that count before the show, but I think it's 7.
Okay.
7 tours that were in excess of 1,300 miles. So several of them were fairly short.
All solo?
Okay.
All solo. The first one was, I want to say it was 2017. By this point, I had a relationship with a woman in Hamburg, Germany, and I would flip 6 months in the States, 6 months with her, because that was the extent of what I could stay there on a visa, by the way.
Yep. You have to leave the country.
Yeah. So I was there in the wintertime, by the way, and I would come back here and race, and so I'd start my training.
And what did you race? Just to clarify.
Before I left the university, 2013 was one of the years I was still there. I left in 2015. In 2013, I decided, still feeling quite badly, I decided to do something I'd never done before. So normally when life isn't going well, we just eat more of that turd soup, right?
Sure.
And
break out the toothbrush and just keep eating sandwiches.
Right. So
who's brushing?
I will tell only a small part of this because I don't want to give the person any credit, but I had a relationship come to a conclusion, and
as we all have.
It was a short-term relationship. In hindsight, it was seemingly insignificant, but of course, maybe everything is significant. But anyway, it put me a little deeper in the hole that I was already in for a short time. But but during that little window, I was having the same thoughts I had many times, just feeling really bad for myself. And what is the point of that, right?
Sure.
And for reasons I do not understand, one day I said, "Fuck it," basically. All right. So I was told that I could swear on the show. So there you go. One little F-bomb, and I said, "This time I'm going to do something different."
You had that thought.
I did, yeah.
Okay.
And I said, "Okay, well, I was aware of this 100-mile bike race called the Leadville 100. It starts at 10,000 feet in the highest incorporated town in the lower 48 in Colorado. Around here, we're all very familiar with Leadville, an old mining town. And you ride 50 miles out and back up to almost 12,500 feet. So it's a very serious endurance challenge. I said to myself, I'm going to try to qualify and race in the Leadville 100. And by chance, I had met a guy who had offered to coach me. So I'm leaving out some of what had happened on the GT. Part of that story is untold, but obviously I was riding the bike a lot.
Seems
at some
like it.
point.
Yeah, got pretty good at it.
So I was thinking about an endurance athlete sort of context. So I called up Alex 3 days later. I said, I want to do this. I want to try to race in this event. He said, come on over. I went over there. He went into his garage and pulled out a 29er hardtail, and he loaned me that bike. And 2 weeks later, I went to Texas. I put the bike together in a hotel room, and I was in my first race, and I finished feeling unbelievably good. Now I didn't qualify, by the way, but anyway, that's when the racing started, and I've kept that going ever since. So last season was my 7th season racing a mountain bike, and 2 days ago, today was the second day. I've started training for my 8th season.
Okay.
And I'm excited to announce that I have a new coach, Rick Crawford. Certainly his depth goes back many decades.
Okay.
And it's going to take me to Durango a little bit.
Which makes me sad, but
yeah.
It's not about me.
That's why he's here. We wouldn't have him here, perhaps,
I know.
if he wasn't on his way out.
Well, I hope it's not. For example, Yoga Pod Fort Collins is a very important part of my life. The instructors and the atmosphere and the community and the exercise, the cleansing that I get in hot classes. There's just so many things that place is such a important part of my wellness that it's serious for me to leave it. But I think I'll be back in the spring, and maybe even in between. Durango's 8 hours away, so it's a serious drive. But
I feel like I don't feel like we missed the mark, but we really haven't gone into the tour at all. And I feel like we're gonna have to have I feel like we're gonna have a whole separate show where you basically start in the beginning and you go, and maybe we'll do like a bonus episode, like.
Well, yeah, we can always do a call in for the full story, but I have questions.
Oh, for sure.
About it, and I want to know about it because I think the thing that fascinates me about this is getting to know you better has been really, really awesome. And
the kid in the onesie you're picturing.
Yeah, the kid in the onesie.
Sure.
And I think what people don't understand is they look at this and they think, okay, he's totally switched his career to be, this racing cyclist, whatever, I don't know what we call you.
A cyclist.
Cyclist.
You're a professional cyclist?
Technically, I'm a master.
Okay.
I've raced pretty well against some pros on a given day.
Okay.
The elite pros are very far down the trail in a big hurry.
Mm-hmm.
But I get to have conversations with them.
Yeah.
Nice.
There you go. Cool.
Well, and so and that's kind of what I'm getting at is it looks glamorous, right? From a distance, like it looks like this is what he does for a career, and I think, it's interesting to take into account how much you sacrifice to do this kind of thing as a path, in your life. The other thing that really fascinates me is what is it like out there by yourself? Because I crave that. I used to have a lot of time alone, and then I got married and had children, and I have no time alone. I think recently I took a hike alone, and that was the first time literally I've ever done that. And so that's what intrigues me a lot about the cycling is when you're not only alone, but you're pushing yourself to these physical limits, and then you're out in nature. I mean, you're inspired by all of these new places and new sights. So what is the overall kind of feeling when you're out there for 10 weeks just grinding?
Yeah, well, that's an amazing reflection, and honestly, I feel a great compliment that I inspired that thought process.
Oh man.
By the way, that Germany thing that I mentioned, because I was in Germany, I began as that kid with the onesie to daydream about just going on a bike tour. So literally one fall, I got on the bike and I rode for 16 days through 7 countries.
Wow.
And I covered 1,600 miles, and that said to me, okay, now there's a lot that's possible.
Sure.
So that's where the touring started, the passion for touring. So to try to I don't.
It's a big answer.
Yeah.
So for me, for whatever reason, I do flourish in solitude. But it's I think anybody at Yoga Pod, for example, might, if they didn't know some of this, so I've known Brad Holbeck now long enough that he probably says to new instructors, man, don't worry about Andre, he's very chatty. But I don't know, he means well or something like that. But so the thing that what I want to point out is I have a very introverted component to my personality.
Yeah.
But I also love just as much the extroversion. I really, for me on these bike tours, for example, part of what I cherish is the interaction with people.
Yeah.
And to accomplish that, as a youngster in my 20s, I was adamant about not spending money to sleep. So I would literally get up on the pegs of this old Honda motorcycle and I would ride it straight into the National Forest until I felt the traffic couldn't see me anymore. And I would pitch my tent and I'd feel like Edward Abbey,
Sure.
the old writer, like I had beaten the system.
Yep.
And that I have only fond memories and from those days, and I think I made the right decision. But later in life, I didn't want to hide in the forest anymore because I really enjoy the personalities that I meet on these journeys.
Mm-hmm.
And this journey across Europe, for example, was among the best of that, because I think I'm beginning to figure out, maybe not consciously, but I'm beginning to have even more of these interactions that I celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
So to answer your question, I flourish in that solo environment.
Yeah.
But when I come out of it, and this is what happens at Yoga Pod each day, I show up there.
Sure.
So I'm in my basement at home. Oh, actually, I'm in a friend's basement. A teammate from Northern Colorado Grassroots Drivers. That's the local team, and that's
Nice.
the kit that I'm wearing, by
I
the
love
way.
it.
Okay.
Nice.
And we've got a lot of sponsors that help us out, such as Nick's Italian on my left shoulder, and Alpine Dental Health, and a bunch of others. But
Awesome.
I'm a programmer whenever I can squeeze it in. I build databases for people who put marks on animals typically, and now you know partly how that came to be.
Aha, that makes sense.
I can squeeze it in, and I squeeze it in on my bike tours. I have a little computer, a little Dell laptop that I put in my pannier, my saddlebag, and I pull it out and work a few hours here and there.
Interesting.
And that's part of how I survive.
Nice.
Yeah.
Shoot, I lost my train of thought there as I go with that.
I don't know.
There's so many.
Well, you were talking about how you, every time you come out of class.
Oh, when you
Oh yeah, so I come out of the basement after, because this may be funny, and I'd like to get it out there, so it's, obviously I'm trying, I really want to say it, so.
Say it.
I come out of the basement of my friend Eric's place, my teammate, and then I probably get on my bike for a few hours, again by myself, and then I stroll into Yoga Pod. And whoever happens to be there immediately gets inundated with Andre and conversation.
Because you've
And
been
then-
by yourself for the last
So,
18
yes,
hours.
Exactly. So I wanted to get that out there so people
Are
understand
you
that.
self-conscious of that?
Apparently.
You shouldn't be.
Yeah, you shouldn't be.
You shouldn't
Sometimes
be.
I apologize for being too chatty, but
No.
I spend so much time alone
Yeah.
that when I do come into that space,
Yeah,
especially with
totally.
people that I'm curious about, and
Well,
the yoga community is a big part of that.
Well, I think that that's part of, at least for me, that's what makes it a joy to work at Yoga Pod.
Yeah, I
right?
want
At the
to
front
talk.
desk, I
Mhm.
don't want to just go, remind me of your last name?
Yeah.
Okay, you're in studio too.
I know. I'm
Like,
the
there's a lot of that
same.
happens, and that's
Yeah.
great, and there's a lot of people that don't want to talk. But yeah, I really enjoy finding out more about people, which is why we're doing our FAC this Friday.
Yeah, I'm psyched. Of course, I'm really excited.
Yeah, you are. And those that know me, like I'm not interested in small talk.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
I want to have a more meaningful conversation
Mhm.
every interaction I have, preferably. So
Mm-hmm.
I
It's
think
either
it's
dick
great.
and fart jokes or a real
Yeah, we're
conversation.
either eating, talking about food, or a real conversation. Yeah. My other question.
I hope I answered the first
Yeah,
one.
you
but-
did,
did.
and I think
Okay.
the overarching thing that I pull from that is that there's so much more involved in that journey in terms of getting out and connecting with it. I
Yeah.
think that's how we learn. I think it's interesting that years of academia and study have been such a big part of your life. I find travel very educational.
Mhm.
I find meeting other people from different cultures very educational, and it sounds like that's still part of your process, is like learning and educating
Yeah.
along the way, and how can I improve and what can I learn. I think when you take that attitude into all areas of life, you can find it to be more meaningful. My other question was, what is it like physically when you're out there, and then what is it like physically when you come back from 10 weeks of being on a bicycle?
Yeah.
That's so, I rode my bike. I told you this, and I'll tell it on here. I think I told Ken too. I bought a bike. We bought a new house in June, and it's in Old Town, and I was really excited to be able to ride my bike to and from work because I've always wanted to do that. And I think it's just under 4 miles, 3.8 miles. 3.8 miles on the Mason Trail.
The old 5K.
Yeah, exactly.
Doing a 5K to work.
Like, exactly. And there's a little hill. I mean, it's not that big. It's the one that's behind the Whole Foods. Yeah, behind Whole Foods to get up to Drake. And the very first day I rode, I got to that hill and I was like, this is so hard. Like,
now I remember this story.
This is so difficult. And I was sweating and I had to stand up, you know, when you have to pedal, you stand up to pedal. And I was like, you can do this. And then I thought about Andre, and I was like, Andre is literally riding his bike across Europe right now, and you're dying on this hill. You're
going to be okay.
Do this one for Andre.
Okay.
And I did, and
That's
I made it my 3.8 miles to work.
Okay.
But physically, you know, I was so sore after those first couple bike rides.
Right. Yeah.
So what is that like during and then, you know, when you return? And how does yoga come into play?
Yeah. Well, don't let me forget the return part, because honestly, I'll start with I'll try to give some insight to the first part, and don't let me forget about my reintegration.
Okay.
Because this was the first time I reintegrated after 10 weeks. And to give you a clue of how challenging it's been, when I spoke with my new coach, Rick Crawford, just a few days ago, I said, I think the first thing that we need to work on is getting me back to a normal space. I said something like that. So the tour set me into such a deep fatigue, and it set me solo, right, for 10 weeks.
Yeah.
So mentally and physically, I arrived to spaces, each of those spaces, that I had no experience.
Yeah.
And then I arrived, so I guess I'm hitting the second question first. As part of that, I arrived in Istanbul. I had a very difficult time actually getting across part of Istanbul, because I didn't realize that big parts of the city would be off limits. And the routing software that I used didn't realize that either, so my route was going just fine, and then I got to a gate and I couldn't go through, and the only way to get around it was basically an interstate. And I tried a couple times. It was a university, and you couldn't go on the university campus.
Wow.
They would not let me. I tried twice, and they refused to let. I said, see the GPS, I just need to go across to here, and they wouldn't let me. But anyway, I arrived at the Bosphorus. I arrived to a ferry boat terminal, all planned. So I got back on track, and pretty quick I'm in the middle of the Bosphorus, and then I'm shooting a short video. As you know, I posted a bunch of videos from the tour, and so the tour comes to an end. I land on the other side, Karakoy, a little subunit of Istanbul, and I make my way 4 floors up in a building. I park the bike, I take a shower, and I stroll downstairs, and at that point I begin to absorb that the next day I won't get on a bike, right? So it was very quick, the conclusion.
Yeah.
And then a couple friends show up the next day, one from Belgium, one from Germany, and we spent 4 or 5 days together in the city, which was amazing. So that distracted me from the process that was coming. So when I landed back in Colorado, I was expecting naively that I would just recover and enjoy the time off, but instead I was in this mental and physical space that left me a bit confused.
Makes sense.
And let me bring yoga into it too now. There are so many, as the two of you know, there's at least a half a dozen reasons. And I love that poster in my Mass accent just slipped out there. Did you catch it?
Yeah.
I was talking about a poster.
Poster.
There's a poster in the studio that lists all the benefits of yoga.
Yes,
And
for
reading
body,
it's
for
amazing.
body and mind.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So when I got back and I started feeling this way, and actually I'll admit too that I had a couple of days of not deep depression like I was a postdoc at CSU and near the end of my trial there, but I nonetheless have had some not so good days, and part of that story is when you push yourself super hard, and I had in the last week of October 2018, I started training with my coach at that time, Chris Baddock, who is an amazing coach, and honestly this year I had 5 of roughly my best 12 performances.
Wow.
So Chris really brought me to a new level. I won't get into why I switched because it's another long story, but I started with Chris the last week of October 2018, and I trained and raced until August 10th, 2019.
Mm-hmm.
That was about 9,000 miles on the bike, and August 19th, I got on a plane. 2 days later, I was in northern Scotland, and I rode 4,392 miles in 10 weeks. So,
So like 15,000 miles
it was
on a bike.
It was quite a lot.
14,000, 13,000 miles, something like that.
Right. So,
That's a lot.
what this does to you is it produces an enormous amount of feel good,
Mm-hmm.
despite how hard the journey is, and I'll
Yeah.
get back to that. What people need to realize and protect themselves, they need to communicate with the people who they spend time with, husband or wife, etc., and their coworkers maybe too, or their yoga instructors, and say, this is what I've done to myself. I'm going to have some dark days.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a price to pay, and I realized it more after this year than I ever have before.
Sure.
For asking that much of your body, which gives you all this feel-good hormones, etc. But when it's over, you got to be prepared to pay a little bit
Yeah.
on Piper.
Mm.
It's like you wonder how the people feel after the World Series, right?
Yeah.
Especially the losers.
Any big,
Not the same thing,
Yeah.
obviously, like from an output standpoint, but like like a big thing like that.
from an
You're like,
energy standpoint
yeah,
alone,
for sure.
just how much you've invested, and then
Mhm.
and that's an interesting concept. I think it's like, yeah, what is supposed to happen when you arrive in Istanbul? Like, it's a little
Exactly,
bit
yeah.
anticlimactic. You
Yes,
take a
yes.
shower, you set your bike down, you go
Yeah.
downstairs, and it's like, this is over.
Yeah.
And it's a big deal, but I think the big deal is all of the space before, in between, and after that occurs.
For sure.
And there's
Right.
something I think really fascinating about pushing our bodies physically. I think that's what's so fascinating about the hot practice,
Yeah.
is that push and what you're capable of doing, and then what comes after that. Like, how do you secure your health following a big event?
For sure.
And I know you haven't even been back for that long.
No.
No, it's I was back on the ground. I left Istanbul one morning and I landed in Denver the same day. That was pretty neat.
Wow.
That was October 28th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like a month. We're back for a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
crazy.
you've really kind of dove back into your yoga practice at
Mhm.
this point.
Big
I mean,
time.
the 22
Big time,
inches
yeah.
of snow outside don't help your
Yeah.
cycling.
Mhm.
So
at
yoga,
all.
let me dive into yoga for a moment.
Yeah.
So I knew I had to take a break from the bike. By the way, I'd love to say something too about what I think the greatest insight from the tour was. Just let me say that real quick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go for it.
People wanted to know what happened in the middle of the Bosphorus. That's the edge of the European subcontinent, right?
Mm.
So when I set out on this tour, I said, okay, I want to cross the European subcontinent as a kid from basically Boston. I thought that sounded pretty neat.
It does.
That is fun.
I had other reasons of doing it too, but anyway, so I arrived in the middle of the Bosphorus. What do I feel? I'm wasted. And mentally, I'm suffering from what you would call a central nervous system fatigue.
Sure.
So my mind is not processing efficiently. It's
Mhm.
tired. I mean,
Mhm.
basically, in a word, it's tired. And my body is tired. So what do I feel in the middle of Bosphorus? I feel relief. I feel a certain amount of excitement. I shed some tears,
Mm-hmm.
mostly when I get to a to the other side, not overwhelmingly. I'm beginning to develop perspective. But with that statement, it's a good lead into what I think what was really a surprise, and maybe it shouldn't have been, but it was for me. And that is, the tour gave so much over that space. I met so many people. I saw so much countryside. I ate so many amazing things, far too much, by the way. That was really a gift from the universe.
Yeah.
To say I'm going to go, by the way, that's the hardest thing in the whole bike tour. The hardest thing was starting. If you want to do something like this, starting is the hardest thing. You will find a solution for everything else. I don't care if you show up with a Speedo in Edinburgh to do a bike tour across the United States. You will still succeed. You just need to start.
You just got to show up.
Sure.
Right? That's the hardest thing with a bike tour. So back to this what was the greatest insight, basically. When I got back, sure, I had a little depression here and there. I was going to yoga twice a day, and I want to talk more about that. Within a couple of weeks, I began to realize that the greatest part of the tour hadn't yet happened. As the central nervous system fatigue began to degrade, and my nervous system began to heal, the perspective of the entire tour started to become available. So imagine if you shot a video from Duncansby Head at the north of Scotland all the way to Istanbul, how many individual images that video would represent, right? Because video is many images played very quickly, right? So it'd be billions and billions, right?
Totally.
Your mind has to store those. How many it stores, we don't know. But each night when we sleep, for example, it takes the images from the day and it processes those images. That's why sleep is so important, and it builds relationships between images that we took that day and images we took days before. Builds relationships, and this is how we develop perspective. By the way, Stephen Walker is this amazing researcher on the topic of sleep, if anybody's curious about where some of that came from. So imagine it was one long day, and then I sleep, and that sleep begins to organize those images and relate them to my entire life. That's what I'm experiencing now. So the best part of the tour is after the Bosphorus. So that is the insight from this adventure that I cherish the most, that people say, what is the best part? Actually, shockingly, it's now and in the future.
That's so cool.
That's so neat.
Well,
you should write a book.
yeah, there's so much more that we could go into. We are at an hour and 15 minutes already.
Which I think we should. I think.
Yeah, we've got to have you on to kind of talk. I want to talk like logistics. I want to talk like what was the hardest place to find to go to the bathroom. Like
I'd love to talk about
all
that
stuff. all the.
And I want to talk about all the woo-woo stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
The woo-woo stuff.
Yeah, the weird, the mind stuff.
Oh yeah,
That's what gets me. That's what I get.
By the way, just let me say quickly that I used yoga to cleanse my body, following all the bad food choices that I made, like lots of single serving pizzas in Italy. But how could you resist them?
When in Italy,
village,
right?
But there's we can talk about maybe a little nutrition next time too. But I wanted to purge my body of these poor choices. Plus, I had accumulated an enormous amount of metabolites, right?
Yeah.
So free radicals, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I did my best to stretch on the tour, but I was not bent over the bike per se. But obviously, I could loosen up a bit after that journey. So and the mental side of things. So I went to yoga twice a day to clean my body's physical system, to loosen up my tight cycling muscles, and to initiate some strength building back in my core and other parts of my body that were neglected during that journey.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
And to chill,
Yeah.
to quiet, to
Yeah.
close my eyes and chill my mind. Because one thing about cycling is you are constantly bombarded by every molecule in the atmosphere. And it's a privilege, and this is part of the question I didn't get to answer. But at the same time, that much frenetic energy colliding with the skin will wear you down big time. So in that space at Yoga Pod, I was able to sit on my mat and begin to let all of that motion come down to stillness.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so honored that we were able to be
I know.
part of that journey. I mean,
So
it's
important,
so
obviously.
incredible and profound and inspirational and
For sure. Where can people see more about your journey? Because I know you've got a lot of resources online that are pretty well populated.
Yeah, I would love for people to go to andrebretonracing.com. And I created this website as a repository for my racing experience. I created the website thinking, okay, it'll be like a journal. I'll put it all there. It'll be something that I'll look back on and enjoy scrolling images and that sort of thing. But then I started touring, so I integrated touring. I added a blog. So it's kind of pieced together, but hopefully still a whole image. In particular, go to the website, andrebretonracing.com.
I just put it in the comments.
Great. And then click on travel logs. And the second one is La Tour de Europe, which was my sort of fun name for what I originally named Duncan's Behead to Istanbul by bicycle. So look for La Tour de Europe and you'll find lots of images, lots of maps, and lots of text.
Sweet. That's awesome. Yeah, and then you're also on social media, Here by Chance.
Here by Chance with dots, so here.by.chance on Instagram. And I'm on Strava. I'd love folks that are into the data, like every road, village, mile, hill. I climbed over 230,000
Oh,
feet
man.
on the
That's
tour.
the equivalent of climbing like Mount Everest how many times?
Almost 8 times from sea level.
Yeah.
From sea level.
in
Base
10
camp for Mount Everest is what, 14,000 feet or something?
I don't know.
I think it's 19 roughly.
You know.
I mean, it's just incredible.
That's right.
And I think, we need to do a part 2, a part
For
deuce,
sure.
if you will, and maybe we can do that from Durango via video chat
Yeah, that'd
and
be
get
fun.
you
Okay,
Cool.
cool.
on, because I think there's just more information
For
here,
sure.
and I think
We scratched the surface.
we did, and I think the thing that people are really interested in is this after process too, and what that looks like for you as you now have decided to start training again.
Yeah.
1 month later.
Oh, a month later.
1 month
so
later. I
Yes,
mean, I'm
that's
certainly
another
inspired to go do something.
Spectacular.
More than I'm doing.
I'm so flattered that we talked about my past. I didn't see that coming.
Cool.
But if I could just say, what I want to be a part of is this is the community that demonstrates that so much more is possible in a space where we often get so down about what I think are really pointless subjects.
Sure.
And we are so buried in this country with just these most ludicrous conclusions.
Sure.
Yes.
We need as individuals to have hope, and we need to feel good every day. Yoga can be a part of that, and then we can put something positive forward. And so that's what I want to be a part of.
Awesome.
You don't have to cross a continent. You can climb a hill.
You can.
And then if you want to build from there, do it. But if you don't, just be satisfied that your body is amazing, much more amazing than a smartphone, by the way. And share that feel good with everybody you come in contact with.
Agreed.
That's
Well,
how
and
we
I
can
love
make
that.
a positive change.
I
think.
love
Agreed.
that, and you're exactly right. I mean, it's like the nobody ever believed you could run a mile in under 4 minutes because nobody had, and then one guy does,
That's right.
and
Boom.
months later dozens more, because we need to understand what's possible, and we are equipped for greatness. And I think
Agreed.
yoga and cycling and all these other things help us achieve that. So you
For
are inspired. You're already doing what you want to do. I think it's important to acknowledge where you're at. So
Sure.
thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Andre.
It was a pleasure.
We'll see you all later.
Ciao.
Bye.
Cool. Well, thank you. Wow, you guys really got into my past. Good thing I kept the bad stuff out, other than I joined a fraternity. But honestly, I don't regret that.
I think we're still on.
No, I keep talking. I like it. That's not what I meant to do. I just can't get to the end thing.
There's